Hello and welcome back. Today we are doing a very special model in honor of the newest patch coming soon to Baldur's Gate 3. We're doing the Owlbear, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to skip some of the more tutorial tips kind of thing and just focus on kind of painting today. We're going to be starting out with Flare 1 Flesh, and we're actually going to be applying this not to the whole model, but just to the kind of underside here. If I can find my brush, perfect. Just want a little bit of water mixed in. That way our paint doesn't come on too thick, hopefully. And already I need to add more. We're off to a good start. I think unfortunately my flayed one flesh was dried out a little bit. We're going to go ahead and just apply it very liberally to the underside of the model here. We don't want the whole thing, we just want kind of where the more fleshy areas are. You can kind of tell where the fur is meant to be. And that's generally the entire underside here. And we don't have to be too perfect with this. This is kind of just our first layer. We will be going back over it once this dries. But this gives us kind of a good starting point. And we will be getting the face as well, actually. So we'll make sure we get just a little bit thicker paint here. Not too thick. We don't want our paint looking chunky once we're done, but thick enough that we don't have to go back over it 3-4 times. Now, unfortunately, this model isn't perfect. I printed it myself, and you can see kind of some holes and some dents and indents. That's okay. It just kind of gives us more character. And we'll be doing a bunch of dry brushing to this, so it's going to help with kind of raising and lowering a lot of the different portions. So hopefully it gives us a little bit more detail than we would without it. Hopefully, right? As I horribly shake the camera there. Go ahead and clean our brush off a little bit. We are going to be jumping very quickly to the next layer I want to do. We're going to try to keep this video a little shorter than usual, just because I want to do it in one part. Just to save you guys from having to go back and forth between, different videos just to get the full thing, alright? We want to be able to see a finished product by the end of this. And being careful kind of not to touch wherever it's drying. We're going to go ahead and apply a nice layer of dryad bark. You can use other browns if you want, but I find that this is kind of the best one. It generally dries very dark, and that gives us a perfect kind of starting point, because once we start dry brushing it, we're going to be going lighter and lighter. And the darker your starting point is, the more you can kind of make mistakes with your dry brushing without worrying about it too much. And again, just very quickly, this isn't going to be perfect, but the point is the coverage, not so much the accuracy of what we're doing here. And as always, I have not put nearly enough paint onto my palette. That's okay. We'll get just a little bit more water. Now, I'm using a very big brush this time. I'm used to using kind of medium-sized brushes, but it does mean it will hold more water and more paint at the same time, so you kind of want to be careful how much you apply to your brush. Otherwise, your paint's going to go on way too thick, and it's going to look pretty horrible by the end. But I think overall we're managing it just fine. And apologies if I can't really keep this thing centered too well. It's a very large model. Unfortunately, my tripod doesn't let me really go back that much. So I'm doing the best I can here, while also just getting every awkward angle I can. Very liberally apply all over these wings here. I'm actually not too sure how I want to do the wings yet. I have done a very small model like this before, and I didn't do too much. I think we'll probably just do a quick little layer of dry brush. But if you really wanted to, you could do some pretty wild effects. There's quite a lot of freedom there. And don't worry too much about getting kind of that tan covered up. We will be blending it with the kind of more brown dry brushing later. And if you've never done dry brushing before, you'll see what I mean. It's very quick, very easy. I like it a lot. It saves me a lot of headaches with models like this. And I find that the best kind of use you can get with a dry brush is fur. It's very easy to kind of make the details pop without putting in too much work. And we are nearly done here. We're just going to finish up kind of touching where we missed just a little bit. Again, don't worry about getting all of that tan covered up. Do the best you can to kind of stay within the lines here, right? But mistakes will be made, and that's fine. That's why we're doing thin layers, so we can go back over it as I struggle to keep us in focus. Unfortunately, I did manage to drop this thing. It's very heavy. It's not hollow. It's a full 100% thick print, which took quite a while, but it is worth it. I really like the feel of it. I did drop it though, and unfortunately the nails on the paw broke off, but that's okay. They were kind of tucked underneath anyway, so it shouldn't make too much of a big deal with our final product. And just going back over anything I missed. Thankfully this brown kind of goes on very well. Even though it is thinned, it does do a pretty solid coverage on just the first layer. So we won't have to worry about that too much. And we will get the ears, and we should be just about done. Almost. There's always that one spot, right? Very unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes, especially with my painting. And it sucks this base doesn't have a model. It does mean I'm kind of touching a lot of the paint while it's drying, but I don't really have another choice, unfortunately, unless I did like one section and let it dry and then come back to the rest. But I don't really have the time or patience to do that, so we're not going to. We're going to do the best we can with what we got. We're going to be moving on to our next layer, which is going to be going back to the tan, just doing kind of a second nice coverage, and then we're going to be moving into the dry brushing. And I've actually got 3 separate paints we're going to be dry brushing. 2, sorry. let me correct myself. We have Slavineth bark, which is kind of a lighter brown, and then we're also going to be going over with a rack white. I can never say that properly. Good lord. And just once again, going back into the underside. You can see it's getting applied much better there. As much as we can. Being careful to stay within the lines, but that's okay if we don't. That's what our dry brush is going to fix. And also, if you're doing this same model, you want to be careful of the inside of the wings. They are very easy to miss. And once again, going back over the face. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a very specific color in mind for the eyes. I think we'll just do black. Although I think technically in the game it's like an orange-ish, maybe like a yellow. But I don't have that color, surprisingly, right? So we're going to do the best we can with what we got. And make sure we get the front of the legs here. And that should just about do it for our underside. And real quick, before we move on to dry brushing, we are going to be doing just a little bit of touch up with that dryad bark. I realized I missed the underside of that one wing with it, so I will be rectifying that very quickly. Now just a quick shout out to the other side of my channel. I do gaming as well as painting, which I'm sure if you've seen before, you're probably aware of that. But once that new patch comes out, I think it's patch number 7 for Baldur's Gate, I want to do a playthrough. I actually want to do 2. I want to do a dirge playthrough, and I want to do a good playthrough, quote unquote, because I haven't really done a dirge yet. I have played the game all the way through. I have done a little bit of the dirge stuff, but generally I kind of feel bad, so I don't do it nearly as much as I should have. I didn't experience really anything past like Act 1 playing as a bad character, so hopefully we can rectify that. And I think it'll make for kind of a good Let's Play. I struggle a little bit here. I don't have a much smaller brush with me to get into these smaller gaps, but we'll do the best we can. Fortunately, I don't think I'm actually going to be able to reach that. Maybe. It's good enough. We can't really see it unless we're looking for it, so we won't worry about it too much. And we'll get a little bit more on our brush. I always miss way more than I think I do, and that's what kind of sucks. I'm sure you guys are already screaming at me, but we're gonna fix it, I promise. Some very healthy once over back on these legs. Trying to keep everything on screen. Again, very large model, getting spun around. It's very difficult to do, but we're doing our best, I promise. And actually, I think we're going to be doing kind of a record time with this one. I don't want to rush it or anything, but it is going to be faster than our normal stuff. I think our Space Marine takes like 4 times as long as it is going to do to do this. And once again, let's do the top of the head, the other arm, and doing a quick once over. I think this wing is the last thing we have, and then we can move on to our dry brush. Almost. One little spot. Perfect. As I knock my tripod again. It's actually, it's kind of a janky setup. I have just a bunch of random stuff holding my tripod in place. It doesn't have like a very well balanced support underneath, but that's fine. Alright, we won't worry about it too much. I'll try to not peek the microphone opening up and closing these paint pots. But we are moving on to our next paint, which is Sylvaneth Bark. It's a dry brush paint, and hopefully it'll be very quick and easy to use. If you haven't done dry brushing before, it's a little bit different than your standard base paints. I'll kind of showcase what I mean here. Very large brush. You just want to get a little bit there. And we're going to kind of be going in circles here until you get a majority of it off of your brush. And you just have a little bit left, almost to the point where it looks like you took it all off. And we're just generally going to quickly go over kind of all the raised up areas. And as our paint kind of goes dry here, you have to press a little bit harder. And we don't want to do everything like this, we just want to do kind of the top. And then I think we might do the kind of front of the legs as well. And the difference is kind of minimal unless you're in the right lighting. But we're going to be going back over this with the lighter rack right. Good lord, I did it again. Rack white as well, and that'll kind of make this pop just a little bit more. See if we can't get just a little bit more out of that initial amount we used. And anything we kind of missed going over with the first wet layers, we can kind of get with this as well. And we'll just make sure we get some pretty decent coverage on this side. And already, it's looking pretty good. It's very quick, it's very rushed, but that's kind of what dry brushing is all about, in my personal opinion. We'll get just a little bit more in our brush here. And we will be doing the kind of back end, the tail. And we're just kind of blending along that area where the tan is as best we can. And we'll probably do a wash or something underneath as well, just to really blend it even more. We'll do the back of the leg. And we will do the front. Perfect. And we'll even do the wings a little bit. We'll give it a little bit of definition to those. Awesome. And now we're going to be moving on to our next color here, which I'll try it again. Rack white. There we are. Sorry about that little jump cut there. My daughter unfortunately has a cold, and she decided that she wanted to wake up from her what should have been nap time So we are back. She is back asleep. So we're going to continue on. We're going to do one more layer of our Slavenith bark. Just kind of make sure that the kind of top of our model is nice and light. Again, make sure we get a majority of that off of the brush. And let's get right back in here. I did do a tiny bit of cleanup kind of in the downtime just to save a little bit of your guys' time and speed things along here. And again, the more we kind of get off of our brush, the harder we kind of have to press. But that's okay. And we'll do a little bit just back over on the wings, just to give us a little bit more variation there. And as we kind of run out, we are going to be moving on to the next color, and this is going to be probably the main, what's going to give us most of our effect here, and that is our rack white. Said it correctly this time, surprisingly. And just make sure our brush is entirely cleaned off before we do this, otherwise we'll get a weird mix going on. And we will load up. Perfect. And we're just going to generally apply this pretty liberally. Let's get a little bit more off of our brush there. You can go in circles, you can go back and forth, side to side, kind of whatever you want to do to get the best look you can, but we just want to bring out the very tips of the feathers here on top, using that very light kind of contrast. And we're really going to focus on the face. It'll help not only kind of blend the front here with the tan, but it's also going to highlight a ton for us, and that can do some really heavy lifting with the overall final product. Make sure we get the back equally as well. You can kind of focus on different areas. You don't have to do the front or the top if you don't want to. Maybe you want the sides to be lighter. It's all kind of a cosmetic choice, but it helps to kind of think about where your light source would be coming from. If you were thinking about this was kind of photorealistic, right? So I'd like to think that we have a light source kind of on top, like the sun or any other kind of natural light would highlight kind of the way we're doing now. And we'll get a little bit more on our brush. Make sure we don't have too much again. I want to avoid that if possible. And we'll just continue on doing all the areas that we want nice and bright. Kind of the front of the legs. And again with the tips of the wings there. And it's going to also help us with blending in with kind of the more tan areas without having to really go back and manually do it with a normal paintbrush. You can use dry brushing very effectively this way. And we have one more leg to get, but unfortunately I think I do have to get a little bit more paint on our brush there. But that's no problem, I have plenty to spare. I did kind of clean up this underside as well. Fortunately, I do still need to get the top of the feet here, but that should be no problem. We can do that very quickly. And we will touch up these feathers. And overall, we're very rapidly approaching our finished product. Let's bring out a little bit more detail as we go along the sides here. If you find that you make it too dark, you can switch back to the other, the Slavenith bark, and you can go back over it a little bit more with that, but I like kind of a more matured look, almost like he's got like gray in his coat, right? So we're just going to be pretty liberal with this as much as we can while keeping a somewhat realistic look. And now that we're mostly finished, we're going to be going back over those feet pads real quick, and then we're going to be taking a look at the face, specifically the beak and the eyes, and then we're actually I think pretty close to calling it finished. And I did manage to grab a smaller brush for us, just for this occasion. Very, very small compared to what we were using, so we can get in a little bit more of this detail. And this will kind of help us get the more hard to reach areas. Not necessarily easy to record still, hence why I missed them in the first place. But we'll do the best we can. There we are. It's always a struggle, even with smaller models, just kind of making sure that it's all kind of well recorded, I feel like. But I'm doing my utmost to make sure that you guys see as much as possible here. And we'll just hit a tiny little bit of the areas we also missed. Don't worry about the bottom of the feet too much. Our model is going to be standing, so you can't really see it. Then we're going to be moving into our Abaddon Black Classic, my absolute favorite, and I use it probably the most out of all of my paints. And this is going to let us do the beak and any of the little nails that have on the feet still. Unfortunately, that front paw did lose all of them. That's okay. And we will also probably do the eyes with this color as well. Make sure our paint is nice and thin. Black is one of those colors that you don't have to put much water in, and it will do a great job of covering for you with just a very quick little layer. Perfect. And we'll go back over that with a little bit of dry brushing as well, just to make sure it's not too dark. And we also want to do the beak. And lastly, we will be getting the eyes, if I can get the opposite side of this. Perfect. And we'll touch up the eyes, and that should be it for our black. If I can get more on my palette here. Don't want it too dark or too thick, otherwise it'll kind of overflow. And our face is very bright. You can see I already messed up a little bit, but that's fine. We can go back over and fix it. And we'll just get the other side. Perfect. I'll run one more layer over that beak. Awesome. And I'll tell you what, just so we don't miss it, I'll even go over these back kind of nails as well as I can. Kind of hard to reach here, but we'll do what we can. And there we are. If our camera would stay in focus, that'd really help us out. Perfect. And close this without making too much noise. If you've seen my other videos, you know I talk about this a lot, but my camera for some reason really likes to peak, or sorry, not my camera, but my microphone likes to peak whenever I use the paint pots. Anytime I open or close them, I think it's just like the right frequency. It just blows my microphone every time. Very disappointing, but unfortunately I've kind of got to learn how to deal with it, and I think I've gotten better. I have my Audacity pulled up in front of me, and it seems like we're pretty normal in terms of levels, so hopefully it's not an issue. And we will just be cleaning up that eye a little bit, as much as we can. Make sure it looks somewhat normal. And lastly, I want to do one final layer of dry brushing. I just want to do the edge of the face there. And I'm going to be using a much smaller dry brush to do this. That way we still kind of retain as much detail as we can with that tan. But the very edge of it, it looks like it kind of has fur or feathers. So I'm going to do my best to kind of bring that out with our brown. And just very quickly do a little pass over. Perfect. Let's get a little bit more on our brush for the other side. And do the exact same thing. You can also do this kind of on the tips of the ears as well, just to kind of give it a more natural kind of blending. And we'll do this around the face as well. And I think it's not 100% perfect. You know, it's a very quick kind of how-to, but overall I am pretty proud of that. It's more just the dry brushing that I want to focus on than anything. I might do a little bit of touch-ups. We'll get like some final videos I'll post on my you know, social afterwards, but for the most part that's pretty much your basics. Just a quick rough and dirty. I'm happy with that. And if you're feeling it's, you know, too dark in certain areas or too light, just kind of keep playing around with those different dry brushing colors. You can't really mess up too much. So, you know, just kind of find the balance that works for you. But other than that, I just want to throw out, I do have a Patreon. It helps me kind of make more videos more often. And hopefully you'll join me in the future for more videos.